dissecting and kind of, I'll try to speed dissect, if you will, as best I can. Look with me at verse 14. It says, don't be yoked together with unbelievers. You know, we've talked about this a lot of times in different contexts, but the bottom line is, folks, the more we involve ourselves with the world and those that are not believers, the more likely we are going to start acting like they do, doing the things that they do, being involved in the very same things that God has rescued us from. Y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. It goes on to say, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? It's kind of like sitting, I'm not even going to go there. But you understand, what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Folks, it's kind of like wearing, I don't know, what's the most awful colors that go along? Ladies, y'all help me out with that one. You understand what I'm talking about. What if you actually did paint your house bright pink and trimmed it in green? That just don't fit, does it? It really doesn't fit. Even more so, what do righteousness, what does a perfect and holy God have to do with everything that goes against him? They don't go, they are in the same universe, but they do not. Now here's the thing about it. Those that are lost, God still pursues them. That song that we sing, that reckless love of God, He doesn't, it is such a fitting song because God pursues us, He desires us, but when He catches us, folks, I'm not talking to the lost person this morning. If you're a part of the world, this is not applicable yet. You have got to, but to those that claim the blood of Jesus, you're the ones this was written to, you're the ones that we're talking to this morning. It says not to be yoked with them. Folks, we are in the world. There's no doubt about that. We come in contact with lost folks all the time. We have to be in contact with them. We should be a good example for them to see that there's a difference between those that reject and those that accept Christ, and that our position as a child of God ought to seem quite appealing. If we actually exercise that, it would. They only know what they see. We can do all this we want to, but unless our hands are showing that, they're not going to believe us, and they don't really have any good reason to. That's exactly what I'm talking about. What would be, it would be kind of like, I don't know, there's too many things that I can compare it to that I just don't think are appropriate this morning. Here's one I like, or what can light, it says, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common, or what fellowship can light have with darkness? Have you ever noticed, you can take the lightest and brightest room whatsoever, and you can dim that light just a little bit, and all of a sudden you can't quite see as clearly as you could. And as you get older and older, and these glasses, the number keeps going up and up and up, the more light, the better, I assure you. Well, that's the way it kind of works from a spiritual standpoint. The brighter we shine, the more clearly people can see. But you know what I've always noticed? You think, well, you don't understand. I put myself in a bad position when I show up in this dark place and try to exercise my Christianity. Let me use this analogy. You can take the darkest of darkest rooms. First off, let's look at that bright room. You can make it bright as you can, and you can dim it, and you can dim it, but it's still light. Now, if you want to know what impact in your little self make in a dark place, you can take the darkest area, take the most minute, tiniest of light, and guess what? You're going to notice the light. You can't help but notice the light. Do you realize on the darkest of nights, you can see the light from one candle 1 mile away? That's real. That's a real thing. If you don't believe it, go try it. Ain't nothing you're going to do it, so you have got no choice but to believe it. Nonetheless, what harmony is there between Christ and Belial? What does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? Folks, as we read God's Word all throughout the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, the one thing God will not tolerate is another God. Because there is no other God. There is nothing else in the whole universe that deserves to be called a God. Therefore, God despises someone to create their own. There is no agreement between God and any idol. There is but one God, and that's the living God. says, as God has said, I will live with them. For we are the temple of the living God. As God has said, I will live with them and walk among them. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Therefore come out from them and be separate, says the Lord. Touch no unclean thing, and I will receive you. Folks, we as Christians, as believers, we wind up getting ourselves involved in things we ought not be involved with. And I would doubt very seriously that there is anyone in here that can honestly say, well, not me. Sure you. Sure you. We all do. But he says to come out, therefore come out from them and be separate. We should never, ever have to tell someone that we're a Christian that is around us for any period of time. It ought to be self-evident. Do y'all agree with that? We should never, ever have to tell someone that we work with, that we go to school with, that we spend an extra amount of time with, that we're a Christian. It ought to be completely evident. It says, touch no unclean thing, and I will receive you. Thank goodness that particular wording was applicable mostly to the Old Covenant before Jesus. However, it wouldn't be included in the New Testament, in the New Covenant, if it weren't applicable. Still, it says, touch no unclean thing, or I will receive you. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been involved in something that you know you shouldn't have been involved in, and God was the furthest thing from your mind, from your heart, from your presence? Because you have chosen to go down a little jog down the road. Been there, done that. Don't ever care to return. Ever. Ever. Goes on to say, I will be a father to you, and you will be my sons and daughters. I don't think that our little human minds can wrap around what that actually means. That we've oftentimes taken God and we've placed him in an unreachable place. We put him on a shelf that's too high for us to reach. God is on a shelf that we can't reach, but you know what he did? One time he put on flesh and he stepped down to be among us. He walked among us, he dwelt among us, and he died for us. Therefore, we can be called sons and daughters. In chapter 7, verse 1, since we have these promises, dear friends, let us purify ourselves from everything that contaminates body and spirit, perfecting holiness out of reverence for God. It didn't say anything about, you need to stop doing this so God can bless you. Do you sometimes think that our obedience has to do with the measurement of blessing that we receive from God? Do we really think that God is that shallow? Do we oftentimes act like it? Yes, we do, even though we know better. We still reach down into a place we ought not go, and then we decide we want to be obedient so that God will bless us. Folks, what we should be doing is being obedient out of, it says to rid ourselves, to purify ourselves from everything that contaminates body and spirit, perfecting holiness out of reverence for God. He is enough. Not what he can provide, but he himself is enough to strive to do what we're called to do. I have a few more verses to back up these verses this morning. Turn with me, if you will, to James. James has a whole lot to say about a lot of stuff. James doesn't mince words whatsoever. James goes from one fire into another fire into the next fire. That's just the way James wrote. But James chapter 1, verses 26 and 27, it says, if anyone considers himself religious and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself and his religion is worthless. Folks, do you realize how many times we can talk about, I'm a member of the such and such Baptist church, and we go every Sunday when the doors are open, we're there for Wednesday nights, we got this food pantry, and then, did you see so-and-so, and did you know what I'm talking about? We sit there and we talk. We always want to think that it has to do with using foul language. Some of the most foul language isn't necessarily the words we choose, it's the series of words we put together that are harmful and not building up. With gossip is far more worse than anything else that we might say. Tearing someone down, especially behind their back, has far more damage than a slip of the tongue with an unsavory word. Let's put into perspective exactly what he's talking about. It says, if anyone considers himself religious and yet does not keep a tight rein on his tongue, he deceives himself and his religion is worthless. Do you remember what I said? We should never have to tell someone we're a Christian. It ought to be quite evident. I have used the type of language that I once had a guy after spending 3 days with me. I said something about going to church, and y'all heard this story before. And he looked me square in the face and said, I can't believe you go to church. That just struck me like lightning, because I didn't know that he thought perhaps I was so intelligent that I wouldn't waste my time. I doubt that was it. I would imagine it had to do, and the way it stuck in my mind and in my heart was that I cannot imagine someone that speaks like you do and acts like you do would be a church person. That cut me deep. That cut me real deep. I wish I could tell you that I made a 180-degree turn from that point forward. But you know what? God used that instance to cultivate and to do a work that he's still not finished with, as y'all can tell. He goes on to tell us that religion that God, in verse 27, religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Have you got any idea? It says, okay, we got to take care of widows and orphans and let ourselves be polluted. That just encompasses everything right there. We are to take care of those that God brings in before us. There was a lot to be said about widows and orphans. We have different systems to take care of different things nowadays. But nonetheless, folks, we are to take care of those, whether it be for their physical needs. I love where he talks about what, and matter of fact, if you look over here in James, in chapter 2, look at verse 14 in chapter 2 real quick. This isn't up there, but it says, what good is it, my brothers, if a man claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save him? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, go, I wish you well, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about his physical needs, what good is it? What good is it? Have you ever told someone that has just poured their heart out to you that their life and their world has been completely and totally turned upside down, and you say, oh, I'll be praying for you. And that's the end of the conversation. I'm going to make a strong suggestion that you do this right there. You take that person by the hand, by the arm, or by the face, whatever's required, and you take them down to the ground to your knees, and you pray for them right then and right there. What good is it? And I'm going to tell you something. If they're sitting there starving and hungry, and you got a $100 bill in your pocket, tear it half. I got to bet, well, half of it ain't going to do any good. Just give it to them. Just give it to them. If God tells you to do. But you know what? If you're not listening, and if you're so involved in the world, you're not going to be able to hear it. You're not going to make yourself available for those times when people need them. It says to, let me find myself again. It says, religion that our God, our Father accepts as pure and faultless, to look after orphans and widows, to take care of those physical needs that we just talked about, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Folks, you can do all the good in the world, but when you keep dipping your feet in that nasty, nasty water, they're going to get filthy. They're going to get gross. They're going to get nasty. Are you still His? Yes, you are. I have never read this book, and I used to be a pretty big fan of Beth Moore's, but not so much anymore. But there was evidently a book she wrote or a study she did that said, come out of that pit. And the only thing I can tell you about it is something I learned in a class we recently took. There were different kinds of pit. There's that kind of pit that you get too close to and happen to accidentally fall into. Then there's also that pit that you kind of walk up to the edge. You know what I'm talking about? You don't walk like this, 1 foot at a time. You know what I'm saying? You scooch up to that edge and get up to that edge, and then all of a sudden you just suck in and down you go. And then there's those pits that most of us are involved in, that we run at full steam ahead, we jump, and we probably squeal like a little old pig and jump in there with all 4 feet. That's the pits that we've got to watch out for. That's the ones that it's talking about keeping ourselves from being polluted by the world. You stay away from the pit, you're not going to fall in it. If you don't see the pit, you're not going to run and jump into it. You're starting to get the picture just a little bit. 1 John. I'm kind of all over the place a little bit. 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. It says, "Do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him." Folks, you cannot grasp hold of the hand of the Lord and keep a tight grip on the world. The difference is, the world's not going to snatch you from God's hand. You're never going to not be His, but God will let go and let the world gobble you up if that's your choice. You're still saved, but you're in misery. You know, it's one thing to be involved in worldly things and be lost. There's no real consequence. Hell is hell. Whether if you die, you're already lost. There's no big deal. But but those of you, there's going to be a handful in here that know what I'm talking about. When you do belong to the living God, and you are trying to just kind of casually hold His hand and get a tight grip on the world's hand, you are in pure, deep misery. You can't even explain why you're doing what you're doing. You certainly can't justify what you're doing. And the misery ought to be enough to just let go. But it says, don't love the world or anything in it, folks. It's everything that we see and encounter is trying to get us. It's trying to coax us. And the means and methods are unbelievable. They really and truly are. But we're not to love the world or the things of this world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Verse 16, "For everything in the world, the cravings of sinful man, the lust of his eyes, and the boasting of what he has," and I believe the King James puts it more like, "For everything in the world, the cravings of the flesh, the lust of the eye, and the pride of life," I believe is the way that's put. In other words, when we are more in tune with wanting everything that we see, and our flesh just craves, and we talk about what we've got and what we've done, it says that boasting of what he has and does comes not from the Father, but from the world. Those cravings, those desires, and that boasting, that comes from the world. That's not from the Lord. It says in verse 14, "The world and its desires pass away, but the man who does the will of God lives forever." I'm going to tell you all the world will do. Here's what the world will do. It will trap you, it will capture you, and it will drag you to hell with you. Satan is the ruler of the air. Not my words, God's words. He's the prince of the air. He's been given a bit of free rein. There's nothing that he can do without getting permission from God, but God is a bit permissible to him. He would much rather not have to bother you than he would have to make an effort. He can't get you back, but what he can do is destroy your testimony. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. I know what I'm talking about. There is a solution. There's a solution, and it's all the way from Genesis to Revelation. But the solution I want to share with y'all is back over in James just a little bit. In James chapter 4, beginning in verse 4, see if this kind of fits a little bit. Y'all remember me telling y'all James didn't mince words. James jumped from one issue to another issue to another issue. He starts out this one by saying, "You adulterous people, Don't you know that friendship with the world is hatred toward God? Have you ever actually viewed your actions of, I don't know what you do, but you do. Do you not understand that when we grasp hold of the world's hand, we're exercising hatred and discontent with God? Again, not my words, his. Anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you think Scripture says without reason that the Spirit He calls to live in us envies intently? But He gives us more grace. That is why Scripture says God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. But you say, well, preacher, I'm not proud. Let me ask you this. Do you what you want? Do you do what you want to do? Or do you do what God wants to cause you to do? Don't answer that out loud, because I can answer that for all of us. Most times, or oftentimes, we do what we decide we want to do, not what God's Word says. And what does it say? That God opposes the proud, but He gives grace to the humble. And here's your solution. It says, submit yourself then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. I'm going to tell you something that you already know. Satan is a pretty good fisherman. Satan knows what bait to throw out there. Satan knows what can get our attention. And if he doesn't, and I'm wrong, he throws everything possible out there. But it says, submit yourself then to God. You need to choose. What is submission? Submission is a choice. It is deciding, God, I want to go the way you want me to go. It's not going to just happen. You have got to decide that that's what you want to do. So you submit yourself then to God. Then you tell the devil, I do not have anything to do with you. I don't want no part of you. Be gone with you. And it says that he will flee from you. In verse 8, tells us, come near to God, and He will come near to you. Did you get that? Did you see how that works? You pursue God. You come near to Him, and then He will come near to you. God will chase you down one time, and one time only. After that, you have got to go to Him. You have got to choose. And it says, wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Double-minded, that means I say this and do that. There it is in layman's terms, in 2018 terms. Double-minded, when you read that, well, I know this, but I'm going to do that instead. That you know the truth and choose a lie. That's what it boils down to. It says, grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Now, you can say, well, God, that sure does sound mean, but what are the things... If you are excited, it says to grieve, mourn, and wail. If you are involved and encompassed in what the world has to offer and separated yourself from God, you have plenty of reasons to grieve. You have certainly plenty of reasons to mourn, and you will, I assure you, wail. It says change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Folks, get out of the pit. Don't just sit there and say, well, this is pretty comfortable. Anybody ever see that movie? Most of you probably have. God's Not Dead, the first one. Do y'all remember the woman with dementia? She would just, remember that her daughter went to see her in the nursing home, and she asked the nurse, why she eat fried chicken? Well, she had fried chicken for lunch, she had tried fried chicken for dinner. And she said, well, is that really a good idea? She said, what difference does it make? She likes it. You know, her mind is she's just, let her enjoy something. There's nothing wrong with that. So we were under the impression that this lady had absolutely no wits whatsoever. Her mind had been taken by a disease, and it was not coming back. But I recall the lady's son. He was absolutely the meanest person in the whole movie by a bunch. He didn't want anything to do with God. But he was sitting, I remember the room was dark. It was almost as if the power was out. And his mom was just kind of sitting in a chair, staring out into space. And he was sitting over on a couch, with a $3,000 suit, not a hair out of place. everything perfect. Probably even had a pedicure for certain, a manicure. But he was looking there and he was just kind of staring at her. And he looked at her and he said, you know, I'm one of the meanest people that I've ever come to know, and you're the nicest. And he said, look at you and look at me. Your life, you don't even know who I am. And my life is perfect. Those were his words. He said, my life is perfect. He said, now where did all that praying get you? And this lady who made no sense, she was just physically there, and that was all. She said, you know, son, as she stared out into space, she said, you know, sin is kind of like a jail cell. Except the door's wide open. And you can come and go as you want. The problem with it is we get so comfortable where we're at, we don't even think about the need to come out. But then all of a sudden, one day, the door slams shut. And you're not able to go anywhere. And there you are at the track. What she was referring to, we're all going to die. There's going to be a day when we breathe our last. And the decision that you made to do with Jesus what you wanted to do, or to follow him or reject him, is set in iron bars. And I thought what was so beautiful about that, it was spoken far more eloquently than I ever could. She turned over and looked at it and said, now, who are you again? Her own son. It's crazy, isn't it? How we can get so wrapped up in ourselves and what we want that we forget that it's all going to come. It's all going to come out in the end. It says, submit yourself, verse 7, then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning and your joy to gloom. Humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up. It told us that God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. It tells us to humble ourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. There's your solution. When we go about and we do what we want to do, that's pride. That's arrogance. I really do wish that somehow we could grasp our minds around that. I often wish that instead of using the word pride in almost all translations, they would simply use the word arrogant, because that's what it's talking about. Arrogance covers a multitude of types of pride, but anytime that we think that we're smarter than God, that's what God decides. That's what God despises. So it says, submit yourself then to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. And then humble yourself before the Lord, and he will lift you up. We're going to have a time of invitation. I'm going to ask our praise team to come on up here. And I hope somehow, in some form or fashion, that the message somehow came together for someone in here this morning. And if it did, you know who I'm talking to, and I don't have any preconceived notion of who I'm talking to this morning. Maybe it's most of us, maybe it's just one or two of us, maybe it's possible none of us. But you might be caught up into things you know you ought not be caught up in. You're here this morning, and chances are you consider yourself to be a Christian, and chances are you probably actually are. You probably are a child of God. But you also realize my prayer life stinks. There's a lot of things that just ain't going right. And you know that you know that you know when you get yourself involved in some things that you're not supposed to be there. I've been there. I've done it. It's not a good place. It's not a good place. Come out. Stay out. It says come near to God, he'll come near to you. Resist the devil, and he'll flee from you. Guess what? Unless you resist him, he's going to be right there. Did anybody here last Sunday at Sunday school, I believe it was, or maybe the Sunday before? Poor Jerry came in in just the most loveliest of moods, and I would not leave her alone. I got all of them getting like this right here, just the shoulder to shoulder. She tried to walk away, and I just followed her right along. Everywhere she went, there I was. I'd get kind of in her face. And that kind of bothered. Steve knows exactly what I'm talking about. And just before, about that far away before I believe she actually drawn back to hit me, She kind of busted out in the laugh. But I'm going to tell you what, that's just what Satan does. You want to stay in that place, he will follow you, he will track you down like a bloodhound, he will be at your heels, and he will bite you and bite you and bite you, and until you tell him to stop, and you get away from him, when you resist him, and you come near to God, and God doesn't come near to you, he's going to be worse than I was on Jerry. He's going to be all over you. So if you can't seem to get away from him, come and lay whatever it is at the foot of this cross. Maybe you don't even know what I'm talking about. Maybe you've never accepted Christ as your Savior. Maybe you want to know more about this. Maybe you want to get a better insight. Maybe the Holy Spirit's talking to you this morning. Don't let this day get by. You never know when the Spirit is going to come, and when the Spirit and God's going to finally say, you want to reject it, then fine, reject it. Maybe you know everything I'm talking about, and maybe it's been a long time since it's really hit home. Maybe today is the day that you want to rededicate yourself. If God's speaking to you this morning, all I can tell you is stop running. Stop running from Him. Resist the devil. Draw near to God, and He will draw near to you. Let's pray.